marketing executive Sharon Harris decides to move across the country to take on a big new job. On the surface, the change is exciting, but it's also terrifying because what she's really about to do is mourn the loss of the most important person in her life.
Fear is future events already ruined. Even though it's scary, even though it's hard, just one step at a time. Stop looking at the staircase, just look at each step and push through it.
Hello, welcome to A Change Mindset. I'm your host, June Love Young, and this podcast is about what it takes to push through fear and face change head on. We'll learn from change agents who've led extraordinary transformations in their life, their work, and the world. I hope their stories inspire you to be the agent of change your life deserves. This is A Change Mindset. Hello. I'm so glad that you're listening to this episode of Change Mindset because you're about to hear something that will touch your heart and inspire your spirit. I'm going to introduce you to Sharon Harris, who's an accomplished marketing executive with a career that spans, I think, 20 plus years. This woman is so impressive. She's led huge global initiatives at companies like Deloitte and Microsoft, to name a few. And she's currently the chief marketing officer at Jellyfish, which is a London-based digital agency. As a Black woman in tech, she's a powerful voice championing inclusion and equity in the workplace, especially in the field that she's in, advertising and high tech. But you know what? What I think makes Sharon a magnificent human being is her honesty and her authenticity. And you'll hear that in this conversation where we're honored to listen in to some of the deepest and most vulnerable stories of her life. Whether it's the ferocious German shepherd charging at her or an industry that continues to question her existence, this woman, Sharon Harris, holds her ground against any obstacle that comes her way. Watch out, world. Sharon Harris is an agent of change, and I'm excited for you to get to know her. Hello, Sharon. Oh,
Hi.
So good to be with you today. Thank you for giving me a little bit of your time to chat today on A Change Mindset.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited to be here, June, and it's really a privilege to share my story.
You and I have known each other for many, many years, and we've just gotten to work together. And every time you call me up and say, "Hey, June, let's do this thing," I always get so excited.
Oh, thank you. The feeling is mutual. Anytime I can hire you or bring you in, I always will. You are phenomenal.
Oh gosh, what? You are too kind. Thank you for saying that. So you're in Atlanta right now, right?
I am. I'm in hot Atlanta, back to my southern roots and loving it. Sunshine, hot and humid.
Oh, what's your favorite thing about Atlanta?
Oh, I am a fanatic for sweet tea. I love sweet iced tea.
Huh. Okay. And Seattle just doesn't have great iced tea?
No, Seattle is not the home of sweet tea. Not iced tea that you can put sugar in, but actual sweet tea, which has already been brewed and sweetened.
Oh, see, I didn't know that. I thought you just add sugar. No.
No.
So I
Sweet
actually
tea
probably
is
haven't
very
had
different.
sweet tea.
No, you haven't had real sweet tea until you come to the South.
All right. So if I come over, you're going to serve me sweet. You know how to make sweet tea?
Oh, absolutely. I make great sweet tea. I have peach sweet teas. I have passion fruit. I love sweet tea.
Well, the next time I'm in Atlanta, I look forward to having some authentic Sharon Harris sweet tea. Thanks for the invite. And thank you for being here today to share your change story. So why don't we get down to it? What is the story of change that you'd like to share with us today? Where does your story start?
So my change story starts with the death of my mother. My mother died after a bout of cancer coupled with Alzheimer's disease. And my mother was my best friend. She truly was the center of my universe. There was nothing that I could have done or said that I didn't know that my mother loved me unconditionally, no matter what. But the change happened because when she died, I didn't know how to grieve. I didn't know what to do with those feelings. So I decided I had been offered a job at Microsoft. I decided to pack my bags, leave New York City, and move to Seattle, where I knew absolutely no one and I didn't know what I was facing.
Oh, Sharon. What was her name?
Victoria.
Will you tell us about the moment when you knew she was gone?
I was flying back from New York to Louisiana every other week from the city. I'd spend the week with my mom because she was at home, and then I go back to New York City for work. On my last trip to see her, she died before I could get there. I was in the bathroom at LaGuardia Airport, and my aunt called me to tell me that my mother had passed away.
Oh, no.
And I remember saying to her, that's not possible. She knows I'm coming. And I boarded my flight like 20 minutes later, and I sat down and I just burst into tears. It was an uncomfortable moment, and I just wanted to be invisible.
So you just lost Victoria, your mom, your best friend, and you are carrying such overwhelming grief around that loss. And so what you decide to do is basically change everything about your life. A new job, moving to a unfamiliar place where you knew nobody. What was it about that move and that change that interested you so much in context of grief?
On the surface, everyone was like, my God, Sharon, you're working at this, mid-sized company doing mobile advertising. Of course, you want to move to a Microsoft. And that really wasn't what interested me. What interested me was moving across the country to a space that was completely unfamiliar. I didn't know anyone, and I literally was going to have to rewrite my story as a person. It was going to give me that space and that time to grieve.
What was it about being in New York that made it so difficult for you to grieve?
I think it was hard for me to grieve in New York because of the hustle and bustle, having so many of my friends around, other people. In New York, I felt I had a persona and a reputation to live up to of being strong and resilient and fearless. In the moment of my mother's death, as an only child, I was anything but that. And I needed space to acknowledge I was really falling apart.
If I had no place to fall, and I needed to, and could I count on you to lay me down?
You were determined to make this big change, and you felt ready for it. Was it still hard to do?
Oh, it was extremely difficult. I remember the movers packing up my apartment, and I was packing my bags. I got to JFK and I called a friend and I said, I don't think I can do this.
Okay, well, what made you question the move?
I was just afraid of everything. I was afraid I wouldn't make the job a success. I would hate Seattle. I didn't also know if I wanted to take the step to grieve in that way, because it's scary. Grief is a scary process. You really go through a really dark period. Ultimately, you can't bring the person back, and you mourn for what you've lost, but you also mourn for all of the moments to come where that person won't be there. And there's nothing you can do. I didn't know if I was ready to face it. I didn't know if I would be strong enough to survive it, to be honest.
So on the surface, the change was about moving to a different job and moving to a different place to live. But in reality, what this was about was you facing grief head on.
Yes. And it's so funny because I think for everyone, it would seem to be the perfect career move, a great opportunity. And it ultimately did become that. I am incredibly blessed and grateful for my time at Microsoft, but that wasn't how I entered it. I entered it scared, unsure, in some respects traumatized.
Yeah. So It was really, really tough. You called your friend from the airport saying, I don't think I can do this. How did you overcome that fear and just do it? How did you force yourself to move?
I thought to myself, at this point, what do I have to lose? I've lost the thing that is dearest to me, my mom. So there really isn't anything else that I have to lose. And so I got on that plane, and I remember it was the longest flight. It was like a 6:30 p.m., the last flight out of JFK nonstop to Seattle. And it seemed like it was endless. And I arrived.
What do you remember about those first few weeks and months being in Seattle?
I moved in January. And when I arrived in Seattle, Seattle had the worst ice storm in history. Everything was closed, but it was this sense of quiet, utter isolation. It was like you could hear a pin drop no matter where you went because nothing was moving. There were no cars on the highway. Stores were closed. It was very strange. In those early days, it was like I could hear my brain. I could feel every thought because there weren't the same distractions. There weren't people calling me. I spent a lot of time. I was crying. I was nervous. I was starting this big, important job, and, people were trying to be helpful, but expectations are high. But I just remember saying to myself one day, you've got to make your mom proud. I know she's watching. I've got to make her proud. I missed the moment to hold her hand before she died, but I didn't want to miss an opportunity to make her proud.
I'd never tell you lies. I don't believe it's wise. You've got pretty eyes. Won't you spin me around?
So what were the gifts of this change, this big move and facing grief?
I had an amazing career at Microsoft. I got to meet wonderful people like you. I think I really came to terms with my loss, and it took a long time. When I originally moved to Seattle, I thought I was only going to be there for 2 years. I thought I'd be there 2 years. I'd go back to New York City. 2 years really turned into 10. And I slowly overcame my grief. I was able to come to terms that my mother wasn't coming back and I wouldn't see her in this lifetime. But I also learned that not only was I a lot stronger than I thought, but that I had a clearer purpose for my own life, because there were a lot of dark days. I didn't have a lot of friends there. I didn't know anyone outside of the people that I worked with. So my interactions, my friend referred to it as my hermit period, because I was at home by my cozy fireplace looking out at the mountains and the rain and the snow. And I just got to do a lot of introspection. And I think that introspection helped me think about my place in the world. When you're an only child, you always think about what's your legacy, particularly if you're not married and you don't have your own kids. Will you leave the world a better place than you found it? And I really came to grips with that thought.
In prep for our conversation, I read some articles about you, and there's so many articles about you, Sharon. You're so accomplished. And one of them quoted you saying that change is about improving and learning from the past and present and moving forward. That seems to capture your experience of making this big change. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, change is a constant. Change isn't a force against you. You have to turn it into a force that propels you forward. You really have to understand the dynamics of change and really flow with it. Even in its darkest moments, you can learn something. I always believe there is a lesson being presented to you. And until you understand and acknowledge that lesson, you will not move forward.
Yeah, but what would you say to someone who's just so afraid of change?
I always tell people fear is future events already ruined.
Oh, say that one more time.
Fear is future events already ruined. Even though it's scary, even though it's hard, just one step at a time. Stop looking at the staircase, just look at each step and push through it because you don't know what's going to be on the other side. You don't know what's at the top of the staircase. And you have to believe in your core that there isn't anything that's going to happen that you can't actually handle. I mean, my earliest recollections of it is when I was in the 4th grade and I had a school friend, Catrella Martin. Catrella played the piano and my mother really wanted me to play the piano. And she made me go to a piano lesson with Catrella. And Catrella and I are approaching the home of the piano teacher. And out comes charging this massive German shepherd. He is full stride, barking, a really menacing dog. And we were small 4th graders. I'm only 5'1" now, so you can imagine I was incredibly small then. And I remember Catrella ran and I stood there and he's charging at me. And I remember I'm in my Catholic school uniform and I didn't run. I stood there and I looked at him and he got close and he wasn't going to bite me. He was just going to bark because the whole thing was he was there to, push off intruders or trespassers. And I just stood there. And eventually the piano teacher came out. I'm sorry. And she calls the dog back. His name was King, but I didn't run. And I remember, later I was like, was that stupidity? Like you should have ran. Like you don't know what that dog was going to do. But I always used it later in life because in those moments when something's incredibly fearful, incredibly challenging, the only way to overcome it is to face it. Okay, maybe something I'm fearful of may happen. What if something wonderful happens? What if something great happens? When I look back upon my time in Seattle, I got to travel the world. I got to launch a product used by 1 billion people on the planet. I got to do so many incredible things, even with the fear on the other side of that coin.
Yeah, there's anticipation in both things. One is you're anticipating something that is horrible, so that would be fear. But when you anticipate something positive, do you know what we call that? Hope. Right?
Right.
I ain't much of a lover, it's true. I'm here, then I'm gone. I'm forever blue. But I'm sure wanting you.
I read something else about you where you said that you thrive on change. I don't think I meet a lot of people who would say they thrive on change. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, through all of these experiences, when I say I thrive on change, it's because I do acknowledge change is a constant. And it's about how do you harness that change to manifest your ideas, your dreams, your hopes, and your aspirations. Because always on the back end of change is like this residue. And what I mean by that is when major changes happen, new opportunities come. That's the residue. And it's if you harness the change, you will find a new job, a new environment, meet a new person based on those changes. But if you're constantly repelling it, you can never see those opportunities. And that's why I really thrive on change, because it always creates new opportunities. And I realized I've gone through so many changes and it hasn't broken me. Why would this one break?
One thing I know you're really passionate about, Sharon, is inclusion and equity and justice in the workplace. I'm curious, how does this play out for you as a Black female executive in tech?
Well, when I walk in a room, I'm very conscious of who's in the room, by gender, by ethnic origins, everything. I do a full scan on the room. So I understand my place and my position in the room. I think for society, many of these topics just haven't been addressed because people don't live with them. They don't think about them. It hasn't been presented to them. or it's like, oh, well, that's just how it is.
Mm.
And in this moment, in this time, we are fortunate enough to ask ourselves the deeper questions of why. It is not by coincidence. It is not by accident. It is by design. We are not underrepresented populations. We are historically excluded populations. And that's the difference. We have been intentionally, historically written out of the story of this country. We have been written out of the innovations in this country. We have been written out of any of the positive change and growth in our country. It wasn't by coincidence. It was by design. And that has been what has crippled and paralyzed communities of color. And definitely when you think of Black women moving into technology, yes, you are a unicorn. You are a magical, mystical creature that does not exist. That is intentional.
I am so glad that you exist, Sharon. You are this strong, wise leader.
Skies full of silver and gold. Try to hide the sun, but it can't be done. At least not for long.
What's your message to others out there whose existence is questioned?
Know who you are, know your value in the marketplace, and be strong in what and who you are. There will always be people who will question you, who will doubt you, and who will sabotage you.
Mm.
You have to find support, allyship, and sponsorship to withstand those storms. But I tell people, you've got to be like bamboo. You can bend, but you won't break.
Okay, so last question. We're both marketers, and so I thought we could talk a little bit about what we want to change about marketing moving forward. Like, what are your thoughts about that?
Wow, so many things. I think 3 things off the bat I want to change about marketing. 1, I really want us to think about marketing from the standpoint of telling stories about people, not just selling people a dream or an aspiration, but embracing what is real and what is true for people in all of its various sizes, shapes, and forms. We as marketers, particularly now, it's incumbent upon us to tell truer stories. The second thing I'd like to see us as marketers do differently is to really seek out those stories that had been excluded. There is so much depth, richness, and wisdom in those stories. As a person who's often the other, my experiences, my upbringing can be of such benefit to people in general. Those are the stories that you don't see. And I think it's incumbent upon marketers to seek those stories out because those are large segments of the population with disposable income, strong buying power. Seek them out. And then I think finally, as a marketer, all marketers need to embrace the power of technology, not for technology's sake, but truly what technology can enable you to do in terms of the transmission of your message, creating greater accessibility, having more variety, greater language capacity, being able to make your message reach more people where they are, not where you want them to be, but where they truly are. That's what I'd like to see happen in marketing.
Sharon, I've just thoroughly enjoyed hanging out with you. I know that Victoria is so proud of you, my friend. Just so proud of who you are, who you've become, the way that you face hardships and you face it with such tenacity and courage, just like your mom and just like your grandmother.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you to all of the listeners.
And if we help each other grow.
Coming up, we reflect on this change story and how you might apply it to your own life.
Shines down on her way.
To me, a changed mindset is this openness and courage to embrace the changes we're most afraid of. For Sharon, it was the loss of her mom, whom she describes as her best friend and the center of her universe. So picture it. While she's dealing with this overwhelming grief, life has another difficult, scary change to offer. This new job and this big move. She's unsure how she would cope in this unfamiliar place. She'll be far away from friends and family, but you know what? She takes the job anyway. Imagine how hard that must have been for her to do in this, what she describes a traumatized state that she was in. So how does she do it? Where does her courage come from? Sharon trusts herself. She doesn't know what will happen, but what she knows is whatever happens, she can handle it because she always has. I love that image of little Sharon in her Catholic uniform when that ferocious German shepherd charges at her barking. What does she do? She stands still, quiet, steady, unsure of the outcome, but certain of herself. So agents of change, I leave you with this. When the fear of change is barking at you ferociously, remember Sharon's story. Remember to be still, plant your feet, and trust yourself. Trust your instincts, your capabilities, your convictions, your character, your capacity to handle difficulty and adapt as needed. You know, sometimes the courage it takes to pursue change against all odds comes down to this: whether or not you believe in yourself more than that big barking dog. Thank you for listening to today's episode of A Changed Mindset. If you want to be inspired to lead change in your own life, head over to achangedmindset.com, where you can find more resources, tips, music, and a place where you can share your own change story. And please follow us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to your pods, because you do not want to miss the amazing episodes coming up. A Changed Mindset is brought to you by Zoom Communications with music by Towers.